Good evening, Twitter. It's your boy, Wayman IV, and now that it's freezing to death cold outside, work on the Comanche is going to slow down a bit. But that doesn't mean the mailboxes still aren't out to get me, because I had this incident with the passenger side mirror a while ago. Mailbox came out of nowhere and absolutely destroyed the thing. So I bought some replacement mirrors off Summit Racing. They appear to work okay. And they're shiny, unlike the old ones. I've already replaced the passenger side one, and now I'm going to replace the driver side one because for whatever reason it's got this weird thing going on inside of here where like the inside of it is phasing out of existence. Now, I don't need to replace these bracket things because these are the towing mirrors, optional on the older XJs and MJs. These new mirrors do come with new towing mirror brackets. They're kind of like a universal mirror. They're not specifically meant for Comanches. These brackets will work though with minor modification. You just got to bend it a bit. And they have multiple mounting options in case you want to put the mirror farther out or closer in. So these brackets, I mean, yeah, sure, they'll work. They're not meant for the Comanche, but you can get them to work. I don't need these though. I'm just going to be replacing the mirror. I know a lot of Comanche parts can be hard to find for some people, so I will link these mirrors in the description in case anybody else out there happens to have an MJ with the towing mirrors. Now, I'm not sure if these have been replaced before or not. They look like aftermarket mirrors. I think they have been replaced. Either way, neither of them are doing so good anymore, so they just unscrew with this bolt at the bottom. But like I said, I don't know if this is how they originally come from the factory because I'm pretty sure these have been replaced before. So you got your little adjuster thingy here that's all seized up and whatnot. And this should just come out of here along with the washers. And that's the new one. The bolt comes with two washers. I'm going to put one on either side of it and stick it up through the hole. And then getting as many of my thumbprints on the screen of the mirror as possible, I'm just going to screw this on. It's a 12 millimeter. I'm just going to vaguely face it in the correct direction. Now these are locking washers, so I shouldn't need any thread locker or anything. I think that'll stay. I've been driving around with the passenger side done for a couple days now. It seems fine. So then I just gotta manually adjust the thing. Imagine having manual mirrors. I should have taken before and after pictures, but I like the chrome a lot better than the black. A lot of the chrome on this truck has been painted over and the wheels are aftermarket. I think it looks better with more chrome stuff on it. So that's the mirrors done. So I've done a handful of things off camera. I put in a new thermostat that fixed the temperature gauge. I also put in a new sending unit. That's this thing way back here. That was fun. I've been meaning to put on a new belt, but that's still in the mail as far as I'm concerned. Another thing I've been wanting to do is new brakes. So I've done this side and I'm about to do the other side. So in my time of ownership, I still haven't fully inspected the front suspension, and I've never actually had the front wheels off before. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a rundown of what's going on up here. Now, based on how much rust is on these brakes, I wouldn't say they're exactly new. But based on the amount of wear they have and how thick the pads still are, I can say they've hardly been used. Now that's partly in fact because this thing probably sat for a long ass time before I got it. And the rust would come from sitting since 2003, which is what I've estimated. It's sat from like 2003 to 2016. So I'd imagine these new brakes were put on in the early 2000s and then they just weren't used. Now I reckon the lack of wear on these brakes also has to do with the fact that this truck has a manual transmission. Now I don't know how the previous owner drove it around, but I can tell you ever since I learned how to downshift, the only time I use the brakes is when I need to stop the vehicle entirely. Other than that, the brakes don't really get used all that much because they kind of suck. So I've put on new rear brakes. You've seen that in one of the earlier episodes. Now I'm onto the front brakes. But I also wanted to come in here and just kind of inspect everything because, like I said, I haven't ever looked at this stuff before. So, I mean, the coil spring has seen better days. This little spacer up here is starting to fall apart. I reckon that's original. The shocks have been replaced before. That's kind of obvious. I have service records proving that from the previous owner. Looking at this rubber brake line, I reckon this has been replaced before too, given the fact that these are aftermarket custom bent hard brake lines. The stabilizer bar links have been replaced before, but these bushings are cheap garbage and are already falling apart. The sway bar has seen better days, but you know, it's not exactly the most important thing, and I'm glad to see they replaced the bushings here instead of just these, because when you replace the end links, you're supposed to replace these bushings here, and a lot of people like to avoid that. This, of course, is the drag link, so in order to replace this joint, which is obviously bad, I'm going to have to replace this whole bar that goes all the way up to the pitman arm right there. So that'll be fun if I end up doing that. But of course this skid plate is in the way, and this skid plate is actually fairly interesting. This is a factory skid plate. These were optional back in the day, and this truck happens to have one, which I think is, I don't know what that is, but something that minorly concerns me is this is a breather tube for the front differential. You can see back there, and I'm pretty sure it's not supposed to be routed under the steering linkage and just kind of hanging here beneath the front bumper, so I gotta figure out where that goes. But in the meantime, I'm gonna stop rambling about all this stuff. I mean, it looks pretty dang good for 33 years old. The axle seal is not leaking on this side. It is on the other side, but that's, I don't care about this. To get these brakes off, there are two 7mm Allen bits here on the back of the caliper. Now, these Allen bits can become stuck up with a whole bunch of gunk and stuff you don't want in there. So before you try to loosen these, try to dig out as much of whatever might be in there as possible, and make sure that bit goes all the way in. Like, I'm gonna have to like almost hammer that in there because I don't want these to strip out. I'm not sure if there's supposed to be like a cover or something on top, but the fact is there isn't here, so I'm gonna be extra careful trying to get these caliper bolts off. Now, another trick I have for these bolts is don't pry on them with sheer force. You're just gonna strip them out like that. What I like to do is persuade the ratchet by knocking it like this, and eventually they break free. Because if you use sheer force, like I said, you're just going to strip it out, and then you're going to be having the best day of your life trying to do a simple brake job, and now your caliper bolts are stripped out. Right now I'm working on the bottom bolt, and remember, like the top one, I'm going to make sure that thing is all the way in there, and then instead of prying on it with brute force, I'm going to persuade it out by hitting it. It's like a makeshift impact gun, and that's why the impact guns are so much more effective at removing bolts than just straight prying on it with brute force. Now I've got the caliper bolts out, I gotta persuade this thing come off of here. Oh, come on now. There we go. And don't put any pressure on the brake lines. You've heard that a million times before. Now, these brakes are actually very simple. Oh, that's not good. Look at that. That part of the pad hasn't been making contact to the rotor. Very interesting. But there is no hardware in these brakes. They just sit there. Pressure holds them together. Oh, look at that. Nice. This inner side's been seeing more contact than the outer side. I don't know what any of that means. I just know that that's what's been happening. Now, the real thing is going to be to see if we can get this rotor off without hitting it with a hammer. Oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. It just came right off. Oh my God. And my 2001 XJ, the amount of time it took me to get the rotors off when I did the brakes, oh my god. You know, this 33-year-old truck has been, I don't know, it's had care, you know? It hasn't been neglected until 2003 when it sat forever. Based on how shiny this surface is, I can reckon this wheel bearing has been replaced before. I don't hear any strange noises in that, and I do have service records proving it has been replaced before. I don't know when, but I'm glad that looks good. And also, this cotter pin is loose. That tells me somebody's been in here before. I'm so glad that rotor came off. I actually don't believe it, living in the capital of the Rust Belt. So I'm going to put some anti-seize on here, that's for sure, so that the next person down the line also has it as easy as I do. I've greased up the caliper guide pin bolts. I've put anti-seize on the wheel bearing. Now we need to compress this caliper. Actually, we probably don't need to, but I'm going to anyway, just to be safe. To do that, the first thing I'm going to do is go over to the master cylinder here and take the cap off of it. Okay, it's a bit low on fluid because I compressed the other caliper, so when I'm done I'm going to put some more brake fluid in here. So to compress the caliper, I'm going to put in an old brake pad and then slide this nifty thing in here, like such, and then this just gets tightened down, and if you watch closely you can see the caliper piston being pressed in. It's going in nice and smooth. These calipers still function properly. I did think about replacing them, but I think these might have been replaced before, given the brake lines have. And now that it's nice and firm, it has been compressed. Now it's time to freshen up the look in this front fender area with a fresh, rust-proof coated brake rotor. Now, although these brake pads may seem the same, they are not. One of them is slightly smaller. This one, you can see there are extra edges here. The smaller one goes on the inside, so on the back like that. That applies to both sides of the front brakes. Now, the bigger one goes on the outside, just like that. Brakes done. I know all four of you that are somewhat invested in the series are going to be disappointed to hear the following news, but I think this truck is just too much work to save. It is certainly possible. It wouldn't be a lost cause in the right hands. The thing is, I don't think I am the right hands. Around here in Wisconsin, nobody's seen one of these in 20 years, so it really is something special. But to completely restore and save it would simply cost too much. The floors are too far gone, and the frame is questionable in some areas. The engine is the least desirable 4.0, the 87-year, only cranking out 173 horsepower and 220 torques, running on the old Renix computer system with vacuum lines controlling everything. The Peugeot transmission isn't going to hold together much longer, and the rear Dana 35 axle has a bad pinion bearing. For those who don't know, the Dana 35 is not worth rebuilding. So the only thing in the entire drivetrain that's in half-decent shape is the transfer case. And with the old-style vacuum-actuated front axle disconnects, it's really not worth keeping around either. It is a functional truck, though. The tailgate still opens, and the locks still function. The seat still folds forward, and the cigarette lighter still works. It has some life left in it. And unfortunately for myself, the viewers of the channel, and the MJ community as a whole, I think this one's days are numbered. Now, unless someone comes by and offers a large sum of cash for the thing, I'm not going to sell it. I'll drive it until it dies and take care of it until it does. It's 34 years old, and for a truck that old to still be around is quite a statement. Only 190,446 Jeep Comanches were ever made. And through time, with accidents, off-road modifications, natural disasters, thievery, rusting out, and being abused, I think it's safe to assume after almost 3 decades since the last one rolled off the assembly line that there are less than 20,000 of them left worldwide. The fact is, every day they become more rare, and we most certainly aren't ever getting a vehicle like this from the factory ever again. When I think about what this truck offers, I realize how truly unique it is compared to today's lineup of boring crew cab 5-foot bed oversized soccer mom trucks. Back in the 80s, you could buy one of these brand new for under $7,000. An inline 6-cylinder engine, a 5-speed manual, part-time 4-wheel drive, the lack of a third brake light, the 2-panel vent windows, and one iconic-ass design. These are all things you just can't get anymore, and I respect that. So the Gladiator will never live up to the Comanche's hidden legacy, nor will anything else. I will never have a vehicle more impressively unique than this. No matter what happens to this truck, and no matter what vehicle might take its place, I will always remember it. The Jeep Comanche, the best truck ever.
I didn't stop.